There is a weapon right now that can cross continents in minutes, maneuver mid flight, evade most missile defenses on Earth, and hit targets with precision most countries can't even track. And here's the part almost nobody is talking about: it's already operational, not in the United States, not in Russia, not even in China. And if you're sitting in Southern Europe, you're already inside its reach. But to understand why this matters, you need to stop thinking about missiles the way you always have, because this is not just another ballistic missile. This changes the rules. At first, it looks familiar: a launch, a boost phase, a trajectory that climbs into the upper atmosphere, classic ballistic behavior. But then something happens. It doesn't just fall, it moves, not slightly, not predictably. It actively maneuvers. And that single detail changes everything. Because traditional missile defense systems are built on one assumption: predictability. They calculate trajectories, they anticipate impact points, they intercept based on physics. But what happens when the missile stops following the rules? When it can adjust mid course, change direction, complicate tracking? Suddenly, interception windows shrink, reaction times collapse, and systems designed to defend entire countries start to struggle. This is where the real shift begins. Because for decades, missile defense has been a game of probabilities. You don't need to stop every missile, you just need to stop enough. But when maneuverability enters the equation, those probabilities start to break down. Now, here's where things get even more interesting: speed. We're not talking about fast in the conventional sense. We're talking hypersonic, multiple times the speed of sound. Fast enough that by the time a radar detects it, the clock is already against you. Fast enough that decision makers have minutes, sometimes seconds, to react. And when you combine that speed with maneuverability, you don't just have a weapon, you have uncertainty. And in modern warfare, uncertainty is power. Now, at this point, you might be thinking every major power is working on hypersonic systems. That's true, but very few have operationalized something like this at scale, and even fewer have integrated it into a broader strategic doctrine. Because this isn't just about one missile, it's about what it enables. Let's zoom out. Iran has spent years building a layered missile strategy: short-range systems for regional pressure, medium-range systems for strategic reach, and now something that sits above both: a system designed not just to strike, but to bypass, to complicate, to overwhelm, to force hesitation. And here's where the geography starts to matter, because range changes perception. A weapon like this doesn't just threaten nearby adversaries, it extends influence. Suddenly, targets that were previously considered safe aren't. Southern Europe enters the equation. Critical infrastructure, energy hubs, logistics corridors, all within theoretical reach. And here's the key detail most people overlook: you don't need to use a weapon like this for it to have impact. You just need people to believe you might. Because once that belief sets in, defense spending shifts, insurance premiums rise, supply chains adjust, energy markets react. This is where geopolitics and finance begin to merge. Because a missile like this doesn't just change military calculations, it changes risk models. Now let's finally name it. This is the Fatah 2, and it represents one of the most significant evolutions in Iran's military capability in decades. But here's the real question: is it as powerful as it seems? Or is something else happening here? Because with systems like this, capability and perception are often intertwined. On paper, the Fatah 2 introduces a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. That means once it re-enters the atmosphere, it doesn't simply descend. It actively adjusts its path. That complicates interception dramatically. Most missile defense systems are optimized for predictable trajectories. When that predictability disappears, so does efficiency. But capability is only part of the equation. The other part is volume, because even the most advanced missile struggles alone. But combined with saturation tactics, everything changes. Iran doesn't rely on a single system. It layers them: drones, cruise missiles, ballistic systems, and now hypersonic capable assets. Imagine a scenario where multiple systems are launched simultaneously, some predictable, some not, some slow, some extremely fast. Defenses are forced to prioritize, to choose, and that's where gaps appear. Now, here's where the strategic implication deepens. Because weapons like the Fatah 2 are not just about war, they are about leverage. They are about shaping decisions before conflict even begins. Think about it. If a country knows that key infrastructure could be hit within minutes, with limited warning, how does that change its posture? Does it escalate or hesitate? Does it invest more or pull back? This is deterrence, but in a new form, not just nuclear, not just conventional, something in between, fast, precise, difficult to counter, and that ambiguity is exactly what gives it value. But there's another layer here, one that most analysts aren't fully discussing: economic ripple effects. Because the moment a system like this is perceived as credible, markets react, energy markets especially. If the risk to infrastructure increases, even slightly, prices adjust, volatility increases. And where there is volatility, there is opportunity. Defense contractors, missile defense systems, early warning technologies, cyber and surveillance integration, all of these sectors begin to attract capital because nations don't wait for confirmation, they prepare for possibility, and that preparation costs money, a lot of money. Now connect this back to the bigger picture. We're entering a phase of warfare where speed, unpredictability, and perception are converging, where the line between deterrence and action becomes blurred, where a weapon doesn't need to be used to reshape the environment. The Fatah 2 sits right at the center of that shift, not because it's unstoppable, nothing is, but because it forces adaptation. And adaptation is expensive. Now here's the final piece, the real opportunity. Most people will look at this purely as a military development, a new missile, a new threat, but that's surface level thinking. The deeper layer is this: every time a system like this emerges, it triggers a chain reaction. Countries invest in defense. Alliances strengthen or fracture, supply chains reposition, energy routes get reassessed, and capital follows all of it. Quietly, gradually, then suddenly, because by the time the headlines catch up, the positioning is already done. So the question isn't just what this missile can do. The real question is, where does the money move next because of it? Because that's where the real game is being played. And most people are still watching the explosions.